Hello friends, it's time for Thought Shifting Thursdays. So great to be with you. You know, last week we talked about self-care, self-love. My beloved and I she was with me last week, and today she's not feeling too well, got a little cold or something, maybe COVID, who knows. So she's self-caring right now. And I tried to talk her into coming on, but she opted not to. Said her nose was running too much. So, last week we focused on self-care, self-love. This week we're just turning it around. Self-love, self-care. So there's a little shift in that dynamic, right? Certainly when we are doing things that are caring for ourselves, all the things we talked about last week, and you can look up the video on YouTube or Instagram or wherever to see last week's. And it was a real fun one, very funny, by the way. We talked a lot about ways that we self-care, right? And of course, the more we self-care, the more that we love ourselves. It's demonstrating love to ourselves. It's one thing through, spiritual exercises, self-growth, to tell ourselves that we love ourselves. But actions speak louder than words, right? So when I actually tell myself, or when I actually show myself that I love myself by exercising regularly, by eating healthy, by getting massage, which we did just last Sunday, then we're demonstrating that self-love. And so it increases the more we do that. The more we do what brings us joy, that's the most powerful demonstration of self-love, is doing what brings us joy. It's amazing. I'm writing a book right now called The Joy Factor, and nobody steal that title. Actually, I saw there's another book by the same title, but different subtitle, right? And it's a different subject matter as well. But when we do what brings us joy, and it's amazing when I do workshops on this subject, how few people in life these days are actually doing what brings them the most joy. They're doing stuff that they think they have to do, or stuff that they don't even really want to do, but they're compelled to do or obsessed about. And so, actually determining, and I'm not going to make this a video today on the Joy Factor. I've done many videos in the past on that, so you can look those up as well. But just to connect it with self-love, when we use what will bring me the most joy to do as a compass for how we make decisions in our life, then life gets easier and easier. And of course, our self-love factor goes up. So one of the questions I ask clients, especially if I notice that they, and you can tell pretty quickly if someone has pretty low self-esteem, right, is on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you love yourself? I just did this with a client yesterday, not because I suspected she had low self-esteem, but because she was with a partner that she felt may have low self-esteem. And I'm going to get to a little bit more about that in a little bit. So I get amazingly accurate answers. You might think that people would average up, right? But I've had people tell me 2, 1. I've even gotten some 0s. And what I often say is, if it's 5 or less, then it's the most important work we can do together. It's the most important play anyone can do. It's to raise that to above 5. And if it's less than 10, then there's obviously room to grow, right? So, so how do we love ourselves at higher and higher levels? The affirmation I give to people if self-esteem is low is, I love myself no matter what. Because the true test of self-love is not loving myself when I touched on this last time a little bit, is not loving myself when I just, did something that, made an investment that went up 100,000. We talked about this last week. We had some investments that were up 100,000. Now they're down 100,000. when my investment goes down $100,000, or I make a mistake that costs me $50,000. Done that recently too, I think. If I can love myself in that moment, that is the true test of self-love. If I can love myself when I've got no money, and I've been there, believe me, that's the true test of self-love. So what this means is the only time that I can exponentially increase my self-love is to love myself when stuff happens, when things are not looking so bright. And so that's the good news. That's the reframe that creates the opportunity in the most challenging of situations to love myself more. Coming back to self-care, I don't remember if we said this last week or not. I meant to, and I might have missed it. And that is when we do one thing. I've had several clients that this has been the case recently, that if I do one thing that is an act of self-care and a demonstration of self-love, it leads to others. I had a client recently that just started doing one thing, doing just self-care as far as a personal hygiene that she was improving. And then she started exercising more, and then she started eating better. And don't we all experience this, right? And because every act of self-care helps us love ourselves a little bit more. And so when we love ourselves more, we want to do things that enrich our being. Hi Naomi, unconditional love and acceptance. I've been thinking about this since you mentioned it in another TST. And then she says, I am worthy of love. Oh, let's take a deep breath into that affirmation. Thank you, Beauty by Naomi. I am worthy of love. Doesn't that feel good? We're going to do a meditation on that at the end of this video. So, self-care and self-love. It is the most important thing. My baseline spiritual practice is I love myself no matter what. If I make a mistake, and let's elaborate on that. The true test of self-love is when I say something, is not when someone's adoring me, right? It's when I say something that hurts somebody's feelings that I care about. Can I love myself in that moment? True test of self-love. It's not when I just get, hired for a new position. Can I love myself when I've just gotten fired or lost business? And then Karina says, she's well enough to text at least. Taking care of myself when my husband, she says taking care of myself. Choosing to take care of myself when my husband is trying to talk me into doing a Thought Shifting Thursday at noon. So there you go. We always laugh more when we're doing these together, so I'm glad that you're posting, because Naomi says, love you, Karina. See? She just got love by making that statement. What else do we want to say about self-love? One way of saying is just giving yourself a break, right? Gosh, people are, we're always our worst critics, right? And so when you hear that internal voice, Michael Singer, talks in his book, The Untethered Soul, about, if you had a friend who walked around saying the things to you that you say in your own head, you wouldn't keep that person as a friend very long, right? There's an exercise that we do in some of my workshops where this is fun. Oh, that reminds me. One of somebody in a class, Jenny actually, and I completely forgot about this for our upcoming retreat. She said, there's Jenny texting about she's going to Sprouts right now. Do we need anything? She's our roommate. So Jenny said, you ought to do this in the retreat next year. So you're getting a preview here if you're going to be at the retreat. So this is the exercise, is you get with a partner. And we were doing it in this class on Zoom last time, so you don't get the full effect as when you're doing it in person. You can viscerally feel the energy of this. And so you get with 2 partners. You tell each partner what are those most common critical phrases that you hear in your head. And so one way to identify this, you could probably find a way to do this on your own, or get with 2 people and do this, since we're talking about it. Find 2 people that you can enlist to do this with you. And you tell each one of those partners, give them each one of those critical phrases that you hear in your head a lot. A couple ways to identify this is, when you make a mistake, what do you hear? Do you hear the words, "That's okay, you'll do better next time," or something like, "That was stupid," right? Which is a common thing. And it might depend on the energy with which you say it, how damaging or less damaging it may be. If you say it like I just said it, "That's stupid," and you laugh about it, then, maybe not so bad. But if it's, "You idiot," then that's going to affect you. Just like that, having a friend that were to talk to you all the time like that, that in your psyche has an effect. So let's say, when I demonstrate this with people, the 2 that, another way to assess or to come up with that phrasing is, what did you hear from your parents when you were young, right? That's probably something you're still saying to yourself, at least some of the time. And depending on your self-esteem, maybe a lot of the time. So you give each one of your partners those phrases. So for me, it's "You're stupid." That would be one of them. The other one would be "You can't do it." And so I'll tell each of my partners those words, and then I'll give them the antithesis to that, or the resolution, the opposite. "You're brilliant. You can do anything." And so how it starts out then is my 2 partners then begin by saying the critical phrases over and over. And as they're saying them, to give it a little more impact, they give me a little shove. "You're stupid. You can't do it. You're stupid. You can't do it." And I just sit and I just stand. We're standing usually when we do this. And I just feel it and notice what it feels like. Because what I'm doing is objectifying those phrases, so it becomes real, so that I can viscerally feel what's happening to my psyche when I say these things to myself. Some people, in the workshops won't want to do this because that objectification can be so uncomfortable. But the beauty of it is, let me finish the exercise and then I'll say more about that. So, so when I'm doing the practice, or I'm the person that's being processed, at some point, it's from Busting Loose from the Money Game. That's the class or workshop that I do this in. And so in Busting Loose, we go, phase 1 is living life the way society, from a limited perspective. Phase 2 is limiting life from a place of freedom and joy. So at some point, the person being processed simply holds up 2 fingers, and it's time to go to phase 2, to shift from the negative to the positive. So the partners now begin saying the opposite. You are, and instead of the push, they just give a nice gentle caress. "You are brilliant. You can do anything." And you can ad-lib this too, the partners. You're a fantastic person. You're my hero. You're just amazing. You have done miraculous things, and you will do more miraculous things. So that's how it works. And what I find in doing this with people is, in classes and workshops, is what they come to report then is that the next few weeks and beyond, they become much more aware of that inner dialogue and when it's not feeling good. And some of the feedback we get in doing it in the class or the group is, some people will say, I found it was really hard for me to say those critical things to other people. Interesting to note that it's easy for me to say them to myself, but not to another person. And I've also had the opposite occur, where people say, It's okay for me to say that to myself, but not for you to say it to me, right? I'll give you one interesting story. And of course, the person who's being processed, this is an important point, is in charge. And so you ask for what you want to make the experience as real and as beneficial as possible. So so when I'm demonstrating it to the class or group, if somebody's just saying, "You're stupid, you can't do it," and I'll say, give me more energy, and they'll push harder, and so because I want to feel it more, right? So I did this. It was in Calgary, Canada, Calgary, Alberta, Canada, where I was doing this workshop, and we were in a office space, and I went into one room, and there were these two big guys, and I don't remember the phrasing, but they are pushing this petite woman from one to the other, like I was concerned for her physical well-being. And I said, "Is everything okay in here?" She said, "No, I need this," right? She needed to feel it that much. And then, of course, when it's phase 2, ask for what you want. Say it louder. You're smart. You're brilliant. You can do anything. Really powerful dynamic. So didn't know I was going to talk about this today. But if you can find a way to do that, and of course we did it, you don't have to have people present. We did it virtually, not quite as dynamic, but it worked. So get a couple friends and practice that to up-level your inner dialogue. It's a really important part of self-love. If you can imagine, how does a child react when you give it negative phrases all the time? If we're doing that to ourselves, we're not giving ourselves the love that we need and deserve. Maybe I'll share this. I've shared this quite a few times before, but it definitely comes under the heading of self-love, is when I do voice dialogue, which is talking to different parts of ourselves and giving them love, learning how to give them love, because we can only love ourselves as much as we love every part of ourselves. I did a couple videos on this recently, so I'm not going to do a voice dialogue here or explain it, but I'm going to give you the quick, easy, friendly way to do it on the fly. I was saying this to a client this morning, in fact, is that if let's see, just lost my train of thought. Yes, so just imagine that anything that you don't like about yourself, whether it be something physical or emotional or behavioral, is a small child for whom you are its loving parent. So how would you want to respond to that child? The client this morning was saying, "I want to transcend my ego." I said, and the ego is just a conglomerate of all of the parts of ourselves, subpersonalities we call them, inner child, hurt child, critical parent. These are subpersonalities. If you said to a small child who is showing up in a boastful way, an egoic way, "I have to transcend you," how would that child feel? It's going to feel abandoned. It's going to, and I asked that question of my client. My client said, it's going to scream louder. And that's what happens internally for us. Anytime we resist any part of ourselves, guess what? Every part of ourselves, just like every person, wants one thing and one thing more than anything else, and that's to be loved unconditionally. And so, how would you want to respond as a loving parent to a small child that's being boastful or egoic? And I asked that question of my client, give it love and guide it in a loving way, right? So yeah, that might feel good to be boastful, but what feels even better is to be of service to others, to be kind to others, to treat yourself well and treat other people well, but to always do it in a loving way. Because if you do it in a punishing way, guess what? Child's going to rebel, and it's going to get louder. The phrase that, if you've watched my videos, you've heard me say many, many times is, I should ask Naomi because she knows it too. Naomi, what is that phrase about resistance and embracing? Okay, I'll say it. Whatever we resist not only persists, but magnifies. It becomes stronger. What we embrace becomes our ally, our teacher, and our healer. Quick way to say this is resist nothing, embrace everything. I'm telling you, that is another key factor in self-love is non-attachment to outcomes. Because if I'm attaching to anything that I want to happen, it's interesting, as I started to say that, I wasn't sure how it related to self-love. And it just occurred to me, is that if I'm saying that what I'm experiencing right now is not okay, then in a very subtle way, I'm saying that I'm not okay, right? It's easier to see this in like my reaction to things, and so I'm going to take that to another place now. I might come back to non-attachment. We'll see, but this is really, really important, and it just occurred as a result of exploring that previous statement about non-attachment. Is honoring my feelings, whatever they might be, right? Because if we were taught as children, either directly or subtly, it's not okay to be angry, because we were told, stop doing that when we get angry, right? So almost everyone, unless you had really enlightened parents, were given that message, right? It's not okay to be angry. If it's not okay to be angry, if I'm saying that to myself now, and carrying that over as part of my inner experience, then what I'm really saying is it's not okay to be me, because I am angry right now. And so it's not okay to be angry, it's not okay to be me. So, it's about how we deal with our anger. If I let anger control me, then that's not going to work out well. But if I bring love to my anger and then even direct it, it can become a positive force. One example of this is when my daughter was 9 years old, I could viscerally see the difference between when I was, getting angry at her because she wasn't listening to me, because children are supposed to listen to their parents, right? And it's triggering me, compared to if I'm raising my voice and directing my anger because it's something that I want her to understand or to get. That she could receive, right? But she's going to rebel if I'm being triggered and the anger is controlling me rather than me directing the anger. So, boy, time has just flied so fast. We started a couple minutes late, but let's take this into meditation. Take a deep healing breath. Let out a heartful sigh. Just take a moment to reflect on this question. What would your life be like? What will your life be like? Loving yourself unconditionally. I love myself no matter what. No matter how bad the situation, no matter how great the mistake. I love myself no matter what. I love myself more than anything. The more we love ourselves, the more we love everything in life. Our experiences, our challenges become opportunities. Our financial downfalls become opportunities. Our making mistakes in communication become opportunities to love ourselves and to make amends. What is your life loving yourself unconditionally? What's it like? Just feel into it. What if every time you make a mistake, I love myself? What if every time something bad happens, it's only bad if we judge it, to be bad. If it feels bad, feels uncomfortable, love myself unconditionally. You can feel, you can sense how much better life gets, right? So I'm going to let you stay in that as long as you want. I'm going to sign off for now. If you got value out of today's video, please like it, please share it, and give us some comments. All right, love you guys. Have a great rest of your week, and we will see you next week. And my beloved will feel better, and she'll be here with us too. All right, take care, my friends.